The 20th century witnessed the rise of authoritarian regimes in Germany, the Soviet Union, China and North Korea, led by figures like Adolf Hitler, Joseph Stalin, Mao Zedong and Kim Il-sung. These leaders were deeply suspicious of corporate power and accused businesses of prioritizing profit over national interest. They viewed corporate greed as a threat to their vision of a strong and self-sufficient state. This distrust fueled a series of policies and actions designed to control and often dismantle private enterprise. In Germany, the Nazi regime targeted businesses, particularly those owned by Jewish individuals, with expropriation and forced Aryanization. Businesses deemed vital to the war effort were brought under state control. Price controls were implemented to curb inflation, which was blamed on profiteering. The Nazis sought to create a centrally planned economy that served the needs of the state and its military ambitions. Similarly, the Soviet Union under Stalin implemented a command economy, eliminating private ownership of the means of production. Businesses were nationalized and placed under the control of state-appointed managers. Price controls were enforced to manage shortages and ensure affordability, often at the expense of quality and availability of goods. The Soviet government aimed to eliminate capitalist exploitation and establish a classless society. These actions were often justified by the claim that corporations were hoarding goods, manipulating prices, and undermining the war effort or socialist ideals. In China, Mao Zedong's regime also targeted private businesses, nationalizing industries and implementing collectivization. The Great Leap Forward aimed to rapidly transform China into a socialist society through industrialization and collectivization, often at great human cost. In North Korea, Kim Il-sung established a command economy, with the state controlling all means of production and distribution. Price controls and rationing were enforced to manage resources and maintain state control over the economy. The corporate crackdown in these nations was a complex interplay of ideology, economic necessity, and political control. Chapter 4. Examining the narratives. In the mid-20th century, China under Mao Zedong embarked on a path of radical transformation, targeting private businesses in a bid to create a socialist state. The regime's distrust of corporate power mirrored the sentiments seen in Germany and the Soviet Union. Mao's government viewed private enterprise as antithetical to the principles of socialism and a potential threat to state control. The Great Leap Forward, initiated in 1958, was a drastic campaign aimed at transforming China into a major industrial power. Private businesses were swiftly nationalized and industries were placed under state control. The collectivization of agriculture forced millions of peasants into communal farms, disrupting traditional practices and leading to widespread famine. Mao's policies were driven by a combination of ideological zeal and economic necessity. The regime sought to eliminate what it perceived as capitalist exploitation and to rapidly industrialize the nation. However, these efforts often led to disastrous consequences. The Great Leap Forward, for instance, resulted in one of the deadliest famines in human history, with millions perishing due to food shortages and poor planning. The Cultural Revolution, which began in 1966, further intensified the crackdown on perceived capitalist elements. Businesses were targeted, and their owners were often publicly humiliated, imprisoned, or worse. The Red Guards, a youth militia, were mobilized to root out any remnants of bourgeois culture and capitalist influence. This period of upheaval disrupted education, destroyed cultural artifacts, and led to widespread human rights abuses. Similar to the narratives crafted by Hitler and Stalin, Mao's regime employed propaganda to justify its actions. Corporate leaders were depicted as enemies of the state, accused of hoarding wealth and exploiting the working class. The regime's messaging emphasized the need for unity and sacrifice to build a socialist utopia, even as the reality on the ground was marked by chaos and suffering. While the corporate crackdown in China was framed as a necessary step towards achieving socialist ideals, it also served to consolidate Mao's grip on power. The elimination of private enterprise and the centralization of economic control allowed the state to exert unprecedented influence over every aspect of life in China. The legacy of these policies continues to shape China's economic landscape to this day. The country's modern approach to corporate regulation and state intervention can trace its roots back to the radical transformations of the mid-20th century. Understanding this history is crucial to comprehending the complexities of China's current economic strategies and its relationship with private enterprise. Chapter 5: A Comparative Analysis. In the decades following the Korean War, North Korea, under the leadership of Kim Il-sung, embarked on a path of intense state control over all aspects of the economy. Much like Mao's China, the regime viewed private enterprise as a threat to its socialist ideals and a potential source of dissent. Kim Il-sung's policies were driven by a desire to create a self-sufficient economy, free from the influences of capitalism and foreign intervention. The regime rapidly nationalized industries, placing them under strict state control. Private businesses were eliminated, and the economy was reorganized to prioritize heavy industry and military production. The North Korean government employed a combination of propaganda and brutal repression to achieve its goals. Business owners and perceived capitalists were often labeled as enemies of the state, accused of exploiting workers and undermining socialist principles. The regime's messaging emphasized the need for unity and sacrifice to build a socialist utopia, even as the reality was marked by hardship and scarcity. The 1990s brought a period of extreme economic hardship known as the Arduous March, during which North Korea faced severe famine and economic collapse. The regime's strict control over the economy and refusal to embrace market reforms exacerbated the crisis, leading to widespread suffering and loss of life. Despite the dire conditions, the government continued to crack down on any semblance of private enterprise, viewing it as a threat to its authority. In recent years, there have been some limited market reforms and the emergence of informal markets known as jangmadang. These markets have provided a lifeline for many North Koreans, allowing them to trade goods and services outside the state's control. However, the regime continues to maintain a tight grip on the economy, with periodic crackdowns on market activities to reassert its dominance. The legacy of North Korea's corporate crackdown is evident in its current economic landscape. The country's isolationist policies and emphasis on state control have resulted in a stagnant economy, heavily reliant on external aid and illicit activities. Understanding this history is crucial to comprehending the complexities of North Korea's current economic strategies and its relationship with private enterprise. Both Hitler and Stalin were masters of propaganda, effectively using accusations of corporate misconduct to consolidate their power and legitimize their actions. They painted a picture of a corrupt and exploitative capitalist class that was holding back the nation. These narratives resonated with segments of the population who were struggling economically or felt resentment towards perceived inequalities. The Nazis skillfully exploited anti-Semitic sentiments, blaming Jewish businesses for Germany's economic woes. They accused Jewish financiers of manipulating international markets and profiting from Germany's defeat in World War I. This propaganda campaign served to demonize Jewish businesses, making it easier for the regime to seize their assets and eliminate them from the economy. In the Soviet Union, Stalin blamed the country's economic problems on remnants of the capitalist class, labeling them enemies of the people. He accused wealthy peasants, known as kulaks, of hoarding grain and resisting collectivization. These accusations were often based on flimsy evidence or outright fabrications, but they served to justify the brutal elimination of any perceived opposition to Soviet power. The truth was often far more complex than these simplistic narratives suggested. While there were instances of corporate misconduct, Many businesses in both Germany and the Soviet Union were operating legitimately and trying to navigate challenging economic conditions. However, the regime's propaganda machines were highly effective in shaping public opinion and justifying their actions. Despite sharing a common goal of controlling corporate power, the methods employed by Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union differed in significant ways. The Nazis, while eliminating Jewish businesses and controlling key industries, still retained elements of a market economy. They allowed private ownership to persist in some sectors and even collaborated with certain large corporations that supported their war effort. In contrast, the Soviet Union under Stalin completely eradicated private enterprise, implementing a centralized command economy. All industries were nationalized and placed under the control of state bureaucrats. This approach, while ideologically pure, proved to be highly inefficient and led to widespread shortages, low productivity, and a lack of innovation. The outcomes of these different approaches were also starkly different. While Nazi Germany's economy experienced a period of growth, fueled by rearmament and territorial expansion, it ultimately proved unsustainable. The Soviet Union's command economy, despite initial successes in industrialization, stagnated over time and was plagued by chronic shortages and low living standards. These divergent paths highlight the complexities of managing economies and the dangers of unchecked state control. While some level of regulation is essential to ensure fair competition and prevent abuses, excessive government intervention can stifle innovation, distort markets, and ultimately harm the very people it aims to protect. Section 4. Echoes of the Past, Lessons for the Future, Lasting Impacts and Global Significance. The actions taken by Germany and the Soviet Union against corporations in the 20th century had profound and lasting consequences. In Germany, the legacy of Nazi economic policies, particularly the Aryanization of Jewish businesses, continues to haunt the country. Efforts to provide restitution to the victims and their heirs are ongoing, serving as a reminder of the dangers of unchecked state power and discrimination. In the former Soviet Union, the collapse of the command economy in the late 20th century led to a period of economic turmoil and hardship. The transition to a market-based system was fraught with challenges, including corruption, inequality, and the rise of oligarchs. However, it also opened up new opportunities for entrepreneurship and economic growth. The experiences of Germany and the Soviet Union provide valuable lessons for the world today. They highlight the importance of finding a balance between free markets and government regulation, as well as the dangers of unchecked state power and propaganda. They also serve as a reminder that economic policies should be grounded in reality and not driven by ideological dogma or unfounded accusations. The legacy of these regimes serves as a cautionary tale, reminding us of the importance of protecting individual rights, fostering a culture of accountability, and promoting economic systems that are both efficient and equitable. Section 5. Conclusion. A legacy of control and its consequences. The actions taken by Germany and the Soviet Union against corporations in the 20th century were driven by a complex interplay of factors, including ideological convictions, political opportunism, and genuine concerns about corporate power. While some accusations of misconduct may have been rooted in reality, they were often exaggerated or fabricated to serve the regime's agendas. The methods employed by both countries, while sharing the common goal of controlling corporate power, differed significantly in their scope and intensity. These differences had a profound impact on their respective economies, with Nazi Germany's controlled market economy experiencing a period of growth before its ultimate collapse, and the Soviet Union's command economy stagnating under its own inefficiencies. The legacies of these regimes continue to shape the world today, serving as a reminder of the dangers of unchecked state power, the importance of finding a balance between free markets and government regulation, and the need for economic policies that are grounded in reality and fairness. As we navigate the complexities of the 21st century, it is essential to learn from the mistakes of the past and strive to create economic systems that promote both prosperity and justice.